Okay, Ian Trottier here for Discussions of Truth. We're going to bring in Anthony Bouchard, Wyoming State Senator. Bring him on right now via Skype. Calling Anthony Bouchard. It's Ian Trottier for Discussions of Truth.
Hello, this is Anthony Bouchard.
Anthony, welcome to Discussions of Truth. It's Ian Trottier. How are you today, sir?
Hey, doing pretty good.
Okay, now we've made a connection. That was me a few moments ago, and you couldn't hear me evidently because I wasn't getting a response, and you were saying hello. So it's nice to connect with you, and I want to thank also the person that I've been in touch with that has put the two of us together. Anthony, for listeners who aren't familiar, you've gotten a lot of publicity, so hopefully folks are familiar with what you're doing. Tell a little bit, make an introduction, if you would, to who you are and what you do.
Well, look, I'm not an ordinary candidate. I'm a guy that got started in conservative grassroots politics right after Obama was elected. And I saw the push coming. I saw that the pendulum was going to go far towards the left, and I got involved in state politics. And I helped push some monumental legislation while I was on the outside. I mean, Wyoming became the fourth state in the country to not require a permit to carry concealed. So I got into gun rights politics. Worked with conservative legislators, and in Wyoming, legislators don't have staff, so I mean, I got to help them with a lot of different conservative policies, and I got to see how the place worked, and I also helped the legislators that I worked with become better at what they do. Anyway, 2016, I ran for office. I became a state senator myself. 2020 came along, re-election, probably one of the hardest re-elections in the state. The whole establishment was against me, and I won anyway. Like I said, I'm not the normal candidate because I'm the guy that's kind of went from the inside the bowels of the ship, if you'll say, and climbed up through the middle of it to figure out what was going on. And here I am today. Now I'm running for I'm a state senator, Wyoming legislator, and now I'm going to attempt to take what I've learned and how to fight the swamp. We have the swamp here too, and take that to Washington.
Anthony, you went to college in Florida. What took you to Wyoming, and where are you from originally?
I lived all over the country. I was born in Rhode Island, actually. Spent my preteen life on cobblestone roads and the colonial town of Newport, Rhode Island. That's where I lived. When I was in my teens, I moved to Florida. I lived in Jacksonville, Orlando. Anyway, went to California, went to Central Valley, which is a conservative area, lived there for a while. But when we came here to Wyoming, we came here to get away from what we've seen everywhere. And that was back in 2007. And we wanted to move here to a red state. Right. Oddly, even when I moved to Wyoming, I found that there were some of the same values that were being pushed by progressives were being pushed by Republicans here in Wyoming.
Now, Bouchard sounds like a French name. My name is also French in ancestry. Trottier roots back to Quebec in 1646. And as a matter of fact, Anthony, I also have a connection to Wyoming because for my grandmother, her grandfather settled an area southwest of Jackson in the 1860s. When you moved to Wyoming, you thought it was going to be conservative and red. What was the thing that stood out at you and shocked you the most in regards to, whoa, this isn't what I was expecting from what people generally consider to be a conservative state?
Since I was following legislation, I was actually following stand your ground legislation, where basically you have a right to defend yourself in the face of an attacker. And what happened was there were so many legislators, Republicans, saying there's going to be blood in the streets if we pass something like this. And that's what. There was a couple of quotes that happened to hit the news, and then I had went down there and started watching the floor action, and I went, wow, this is the same stuff that the Democrats say. Mm-hmm. And if you start looking at things like the fuel tax, even corporate income tax, I mean, the Wyoming House passed a bill to impose a corporate income tax in Wyoming, and it made it into Forbes media. I mean, Forbes had an article that said, I think it was 2019, the year that Wyoming Republicans voted like D.C. Democrats. It was something to that effect. It was the article. But these were all, I mean, this was happening back in 2008. I started seeing these signs of these things that closely resembled the Democrat platform was being touted by Republicans. And just so you know, in my chamber, there's only 2 Democrats out of 30 Republicans in the Senate chamber. My fight isn't usually with the 2 Democrats; it's with the progressive Republicans.
Rhinos.
Yes.
Typically, people refer to them as rhinos because they're Republican in name only, and that includes folks like Mitt Romney and of course, who you'll be taking out, Liz Cheney. And I think some people find it shocking how a man who and listen, Anthony, I would listen to Donald Trump speak in 2015 in Doral, and he said, if I run for president, I'll be running as an independent, self-financed. That spoke to me because I personally had voted for Ross Perot. I liked somebody who was independent, withdrew themselves from both the corruption in both the major parties, and was going to self-finance. Of course, as we know, Donald's momentum grew, and he joined the Republican Party. He'd also been a Democrat, but I think he was just a simple fighter for the Constitution and for the independence of the country. What's the most shocking thing outside of Liz Cheney? Liz Cheney having called for Donald to be impeached. And I know Mike Pence gave a talk, I think a day or two ago at the Faith and Freedom conference, and he was booed. Mitt Romney had recently been booed, and Pence had been called a traitor. What's the most shocking thing about outside of her opposition for Donald Trump, as we step into the fire here with you, Anthony? Outside of her opposition for Donald Trump, what was the most shocking thing about Cheney's politics?
Well, are you talking before or after? Because I was watching all along.
Yeah.
I mean, if you take one of her earliest votes, I mean, something like in 2017, there was floor action to move repealing Obamacare, to move that to the floor, and she was a no vote. And this was a pattern all along. Now, going forward to the impeachment vote, I got to tell you what's most surprising to me. She never stopped. The hatred for Trump just kind of came out every time she opened her mouth. I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? I mean, because let's face it, Cheney is a polished politician. And she's one of those ones you really got to be careful about because she's good at word crafting. She's very good at trying to say a lot of things that sound good without really saying anything. And for her to be so blatantly in everyone's face about the hatred for Trump, that was just shocking to me because usually a polished politician doesn't slip like that. And this has gone beyond, it's no more a slip. She has taken this position. From what it looks like in the politics in Wyoming, is she has definitely went over to the Democrats. So she's hoping that the vote is split. There's obviously a lot of people have jumped in the race. That's been the problem all along in Wyoming. We end up getting weak-kneed Republicans because there's a lot of vote splitters. And now you take that with Democrats who have gravitated to her. There's definitely an issue here.
Now, I've tried to stay outside of politics for the most part. I started the program officially January 2017, but I began researching and I was led to some banking corruption through a former Stanford Hoover fellow, Anthony Sutton. Out of invitation, I was asked to start this program, and it didn't really take sides politically. But when the Antifa movement and the Black Lives Matters movement caught momentum, and people like Ted Wheeler and this Lightfoot in Chicago and de Blasio in New York, that's when I just said, no, this is enough. Trump right now, people need to listen to what he's saying, and so I took sides and I pushed a Google whistleblower into the Trump camp. And we got Donald and his daughter, one of his daughters, the younger daughter, to take note of us. Donald called me a prize fighter. He'd called Voorhees an American hero. What is it in your view, Anthony? Why is it that somebody like Cheney, who's, from my perspective, been born kind of like the Bush family, been born with a silver spoon in their mouth, why is it that they're so opposed? And even Bush has had some harsh things to say about Trump. Romney is in that same camp. Why is it that these people are so opposed to Donald Trump, in your view, Anthony?
Well, we can use one word: globalists. Just simply, they're for the one world order. They want to police the world. They want to control. They want controlled government. They want controlled government. They want people, the small group of people that control government, control everyone, control. Look, I don't think they would care if we had communism, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Because look at the direction we're going in. We have a government that is in everybody's business. Every day that goes along, they're passing another law that has some implication on freedom. When does it end?
So we can go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying the globalism. Tell me if I'm wrong, but the globalists don't care if they have communism. They don't care what structure they work under as long as they have control.
Well, I'm not going to reveal the person's name, but when the person that's in charge of your scheduling, that sort of thing, had come to me and said that they'd worked with an avid politician that historically has been very opposed to the abolishment of the gold standard in 1971 by Richard Nixon. And that person came to me and said, "Hey, it looks like you've been outspoken about the Federal Reserve." From a layman's standpoint, it's very theoretical. People like to throw that phrase out there or that title, that label, conspiracy theory. And what I tell my listeners, there's no theory. There is a complete conspiracy, and it's been in place for well over 100 years. I try to educate my listeners on the 1913 Federal Reserve Act passed by Woodrow Wilson. I mean, the plain fact is Woodrow Wilson lamented that. He lamented that. He said he had destroyed his nation by giving a private bank the reins of the government. So for a sitting senator of a state, Wyoming, and someone who's will be unseating Liz Cheney and grabbing that federal seat, how do you explain for listeners when you throw, Anthony, you throw the term one world order, I believe is what you just said. How do you explain that? How do you explain that to listeners so that they understand what you're talking about? And I fully agree with you. I believe this is a communist coup. The fact that the election was rigged. This is how I see it. That election was rigged, and this is a global. That's exactly right. This is a globalist communist coup on the Constitution and the American way of life. And unfortunately, not enough people know about it and believe when Donald Trump talks about deep state, fake news, they don't take him seriously. How do you explain that, Anthony? How do you explain a one world order? What does that mean to you?
Well, look, if you look at what you're talking about with the Federal Reserve alone and how the banksters control everything, I mean, this isn't. I don't think it's obscure as some may say. As far as in Wyoming, it's pretty clear. I mean, honest money is not on it. There is no such thing in our system right now unless you have gold and silver. And I think the people in Wyoming get that. I mean, I've had the privilege to see a lot of gun safes, and you would just be surprised. People just don't. I mean, people know what honest money is when you see their gun safe, and I'm not going to say any more. But I think that we're seeing it now. We're seeing the control, and when I say we, I see the average person is seeing the control coming from not just D.C., but outside of D.C., the connections into like the Crown Bank. So anyway, I don't want to get into all the details of it. I think it's easier just to talk about for what it is. People's economic freedom is being stolen. Their wealth is being stolen. If you take just the simple economics of Obamacare and what it's doing now even the Democrats that wanted it understand the system is broken because someone who has the ability to make an income, to earn income, is being their money's being stolen in the terms of maybe a $2,500 monthly premium that's going over to someone else. You know, they actually cost shift that over to someone and subsidize their health care. And it's just total control over their wealth. And if you see that, the people that are in, I mean, you don't hear the insurance companies that have the monopolies. You don't hear the healthcare systems that have the monopolies worrying about. So it's very easy to see now, I think. That's just my opinion.
Well, I agree with you, fortunately, I think there's people on both sides of the aisles, like I believe you're alluding to. Last few days, I've had on Jonathan Marshall, a former journalist with the San Francisco Chronicle, that's written a book about. It's called Dark Quadrant. It goes into this banking corruption. And before that, last week I had on Dennis Kucinich, former U.S. representative out of Ohio. You're very good at raising money at your campaign. How is it? How do you approach that? And what are the people that are giving to your fundraisers? Why are they supporting you?
Well, I think our message is simple. I mean, I'm a simple guy. I'm a simple. I speak like an average guy. I think that people understand we're in the same boat. I'm not the regular. Hey, I'm in this to be a politician. I've actually voted on the Senate floor in a way that I just vote as if I vote for the people. I caught myself one time, my first year, in my first term, sticking my finger in the air thinking, how should I do this? And I slapped my hand down and said, that's wrong. I'm going to vote on the merit of what's in front of me. And I've done that ever since. And, even though I've had hard re-election, they could never use my voting record because it shows who I really am. And I think that's what the people see in me. They're tired of these politicians that go there to be part of the system. And like I've talked about Washington to people here in Wyoming, they have their own game there. They have their phone banks, and they want you to raise money for their guys. You've said it, and people know it. I know how to raise money. I'm not going to raise money for their guys. I'm going to raise money for people like me, people that want to go there and represent the people, do the job for the people, and clean up the swamp. That's what politicians always promise. They always promise that. But then they never deliver. I've been a guy in the state Senate here in Wyoming. Like I told you, I've voted for the people. I've worked for the people. And don't take for 1 minute just because it's the state legislature that there's not a game there to be played. I mean, when I say game to be played, it's hardball. It's a blood sport. You've got to push back when it's time. You can't play this game thinking that these are your friends. If you want a friend, get a dog. This is politics. This is who rules whom. Adjudication of power. That's what politics is. And people have to have someone that goes back there and is willing to bleed for them. And that's been my message all along. I'm willing to bleed. I'm willing to fight. I'll get in the ring. I'm not doing it for the wrong reasons. I'm doing it because if we don't protect freedom, we don't protect liberty, we don't protect, most importantly, economic freedom, we go down as America.
What is the most challenging issue facing those liberties that we enjoy? You can list one, you can list the top two or three. Give listeners an idea of what you will do when you get into D.C. to help drain the swamp.
Well, let me tell you, you know that it would be a fantasy if I thought that I'd had that kind of power as one person. But let me tell you, one thing that I've learned in grassroots politics is not to play the game the way they play it. I think what has to happen is somebody has to be as vocal as they can be. And that means using social media, using mail, using whatever it takes to tell people what's really going on down there. And there's too many people that go back to Washington and they want to stay there.
Right.
They want to be reelected. So they're told, oh, come on, we're with you, but don't do that right now. We'll do that later. Today, let's work on these things that we have in front of us. And they squelch them down to their voice. And like I said, our biggest problem with liberty today is people that go back to Washington and they promise their constituents the world, but they go back there and they allow their voice to be silenced by leadership. Leadership they're not our friends. I mean, I've learned that in our local legislature. Leadership is there for their own agenda. And they climb into leadership, and as soon, you can see it happen. As soon as they start getting into those leadership roles, they start turning into swamp monsters. So if you don't go back to Washington with the idea that you will expose them, you'll shut them down, you'll be vocal about them, you're willing to die on the hill of truth. I mean, and that's kind of what's going on here. How many times have we seen politicians go back to D.C. and we think we're going to be these great people, and they turn into a dud?
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen time and time again.
Yeah, integrity seems to be a rare attribute in people's characters. What are your thoughts on Ron DeSantis? Ron has done some eye-opening things in regards to the left of recent, and one of the latest things he's done is he sent law enforcement, his state's law enforcement, over to Texas and Arizona to help that border situation. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I tell you what, he's the one to watch. He's the one that's thinking outside the box, and that's what we need is people who don't say, "Hey, let's just do things the way we've been doing it. Let's do it differently." And everything he does, if you watch, I mean, either he's getting some very good political advice, or he is he's sharp. One of those two, whichever one, it's both giving the same results. And I think that's a key. I'm sure he does have good advisors, and that's one thing that you do have to do. It doesn't matter if you're going to Congress or if you're in a position as he is. You have to surround yourself with people who will walk the plank with you, and also give you good advice. So I think that's where he's at.
Yeah, he's been a stalwart in my mind, and I've had the pleasure of connecting with him a couple times in the past 5 months. He has been outspoken about wanting to literally, he said this to me. He said he wanted to dismantle Google, and getting Section 230 rewritten is something that I try to play a role in. Let's pull this back a little bit, Anthony, and I want to blatantly ask you. I've already voiced my opinion. Is there an issue in the United States election integrity? Was there an issue in that 2020 election, in your view?
Yeah, you could see it everywhere. I mean, look, we saw legislatures all around the country as if they were opening up a playbook and saying, okay, step one says, let's use COVID to change the rules. I've heard reports in Colorado, as an example, from people I know, where they were getting a dozen ballots sent to their house of people that don't even live there, and not just one report, but multiple reports of this. And whereas I have not spoke to people in, let's say Pennsylvania or Michigan or anywhere else, I did see that it seemed like the same rules were changed. Everything was made so that way there could be cheating. And so, obviously, I'm one of those people that watch elections. I saw the numbers. One of the things they do when they check an election, they can actually check, like for instance, early on, they can check and they can see, well, this is what the scale or the chart says. This is where the vote's going. They can actually tell from that vote. In other words, it's not just going to all of a sudden turn and go a different direction. So there's a certain point in that election where you see it going a certain direction. You could see that night. It was there. It was an upward tick, and then all of a sudden it went the other way. So no doubt that there was cheating going on. I will tell you, the only thing that I see there's a danger. It's just in my own state, because I have people in my own state that don't understand that. I mean, look, Wyoming is the gold standard for elections. I mean, Wyoming is a state that had the most people vote for Trump twice. Not just once, but twice. And my first election in 2016, by the way, I won by 4 votes the night of the election. And they did a recount, and I won by 5 votes. And I've watched the process. I've seen the machines and the things that we've done here in Wyoming. I tell you, I have a lot of respect for the clerks and our state Secretary of State as far as elections. So I think where I'm seeing some problems is I think I don't want people to run away from their duty to vote. And so not only that, I'm going to tell you, as being one of the people that shows up to a vote certification, show up to when they test machines, show up to recounts and watch the process, that's what we need. We need more people doing that. We need people involved at these election, these clerks' offices around the country. They need to start being involved. We can't. The reason these people were able to change the rules and change the process is because people weren't there to hold them accountable.
Well said. Former CIA operative joined my show. It's probably been 3.5 years, and he said, Ian, the mainstream media is so out there and inaccurate that it's people like you that'll get people like me that know what they're talking about to get the truth out there. What are your thoughts, Anthony, on the mainstream media?
Well, I mean, I too have called them the fake news, and it's almost like it triggered them the times I've done it. But look, they do not report on things that happen in the legislature, even in Wyoming. And this is a red state. The media is owned. The 2 major papers are owned by a Chicago owner, I believe. The left owns the media, so they control the narrative. And there's things that happen daily in the legislature or in races that they refuse to report because it actually hurts their people. And they will omit words. They will tell a different story than what happened. It's terrible. It's just, I mean, look, I will tell you that what I have been fortunate enough to do is to surround myself during a campaign, and I'm talking about in the past, in my Senate races, in my state Senate races, people that are good at getting our message out. And you know, it's sad that today that even the mom that the soccer mom that's involved in politics has to become that blogger now, has to become that Facebook reporter or that Twitter reporter or some. You know, obviously everybody's moving over to Gab and to other social media platforms. But that said, that's what's happening now. The media, nobody trusts the media anymore. I mean, that's become mainstream. Mainstream is that the media is fake.
Well, I don't think I've heard that yet. You're the first, and I totally concur with that. But you're the first to phrase it that way. Anthony, I appreciate you joining the program today. As we wind down here, I'd like you to leave some closing comments, some closing thoughts for listeners. You've hit on a really important issue, and that is basically localize the fight. If you allow me to reword what you're saying, in that you know, listeners, you and me, we are the power, and that is for everybody. You know, there's lots of different ways to do this. So we've got to clean this swamp out. We can't allow people like Joe Biden to live half of his life, in more than half his life, in D.C. and manipulate our way of life, a la Nancy Pelosi. There's a ton of them out there, setting term limits. But again, it's if we don't vocalize and ourselves and our appreciation for our Constitution and are willing to fight. I'm not speaking physically for our Constitution and those rights. Then they will continue to be taken from us. What are some closing thoughts, Anthony? What do you want the listeners to take away?
So, you know, let me tell you a local story here. Something from Wyoming. We had a senator that was a Democrat and he couldn't win, so he registers as an independent. He couldn't win. And then he registers as a Republican, and he finally gets in office. And he was there for 16 years.
Wow.
And obviously he was voting like a Democrat. Where it was most clear, and this is kind of interesting because, like I told you, I was outside of the system, or I wasn't a legislator. I would be considered a lobbyist because I had to register. But one of the things I did is I worked with my guys, my legislators, on getting recorded votes. And we would push legislation that was, let's just say, on the edge. In other words, if you just want to go down there and pass some bill, you know, there's plenty of groups that do that, and there's plenty of people that do that, and they pass some mediocre bill, and everybody pats themselves on the back. And then all the legislators will get reelected because they said, oh, yeah, we passed this mediocre bill, and isn't it great? Well, that wasn't the tact that I took on the outside. We pushed stuff that was so far on the edge that if they didn't like it, they were the ones that had to amend it, weaken our bills. And we would have our guys call recorded votes, and then we would either get it on final passage, we would get another recorded vote, or on final failure when they killed the bill. Either way it went, we had their records. And I'll tell you, the organization, I actually founded Wyoming Gun Owners.
Right.
And that group has the institutional knowledge that no one else has in Wyoming. And just going forward and trying to tell you where I'm going with this, is that senator, that Democrat, we finally had someone who was a good candidate to step up and run against him, and he's gone. But right before that night on election, there was a Senator Mike Enzi was on his way out of the U.S. Senate. He was retiring, and he came in and he endorsed that puke, that guy that's been lying to his constituents for 16 years. And I'm going to tell you, that endorsement didn't work. Because 10 years of recorded votes, and I'm proud of those votes. I was able to help get those recorded votes when I was on the outside, and when I was on the inside, I was the bill sponsor running those bills. That's what it's going to take to clean this country up. We got to have people that are willing to not. And then look, I'm going to tell you where else I'm going. I'm not going to endorse people like that, but I'm going to help people. I'm going to help people that even clean up our local swamp. And see, so many people are so upset about what happens in Washington. And don't get me wrong, they should be. But what happens at the local level, at the state legislatures all across the country, it all comes around a 1990s court case where the Supreme Court ruled, well, federal government, you can't tell the states what to do, but you can bribe them with money. And what you'll see is these state legislatures across the country are just taking that money. They're saying, oh, yeah, look, we're going to get a match. We're going to get a 100% match on this if we take this money, and nobody's looking at the strings that are attached. So they get the carrot, and then later on you're going to get the stick. We need to have those discussions at the local level because people are losing sight of what's going on. They see the Congress on their local news, but they don't realize state legislators have shook their hand and said, let's ruin this country together. So where I'm going with this is I'm going to be the guy that uses my clout as a congressman to come back and help clean up our state legislature as well. And that's why they're afraid of me, because I know how the game works.
It does. It does sound like you do, and I'm gonna ask you one other thing, and I appreciate your time. I was in D.C. in December, and I had the fortune to sit down in a hotel lobby and speak with Pete Sessions, a representative a congressman out of Texas. And I asked him, I says, Pete, we're approaching a $26 trillion national debt. Regardless of Democrat or Republican, does it strike you as odd that whoever's sitting in this Oval Office continues to spiral that debt deeper and deeper? And he says, this is December, he says, Ian, that's a really good question. There's a lot of us up on the Hill that are very concerned about that. I'm just going to ask you this, Anthony. I'm going to ask you this. Was the COVID-19 pandemic, was that a designed threat, if you will, in my opinion, blown out of proportion by media, but was that a designed threat on our liberties? Of course, it was a global issue, but was it a designed threat on our liberties in the United States?
Well, look, you've seen the book about the COVID reset from the Council on Economic...
Klaus Schwab.
Yeah, you've seen that book, haven't you?
I'm not sure if I've seen the book, but I'm very familiar with the World Economic Forum agenda there in Davos.
So, what's very interesting about this is even in Wyoming, look, I was publicly stating that our elected health officer needs to resign. And she was just following Fauci, following his playbook. And there's something that I learned back in 2017. And it's a longer story, but I'm going to tell you. I'll tell you the short version. 2017, my daughter was 14 at the time, never been sick. All of a sudden, she had a virus. And we took her to the doctor. The doctor panicked because her blood oxygen was so low. She was developing pneumonia. We took her to the hospital. They actually diagnosed her wrong right off the bat. It was clear we had to get her out of this local area, and we had to take her to Children's Hospital in Denver. Within 4 hours, the doctors came in and said, "We want to give her something that's unconventional. It's to treat malaria. And we want to give her Z-Pak, and we want to give her a steroid." When President Trump said that hydroxychloroquine worked,
Yeah.
it triggered my memory for sure. And I started reading some of the things. I mean, I had stuff that I had read. My daughter was in the hospital for 8 days. We were there there with her. Every time the doctor said something, I was searching to see what they said, if they said it was true. I was like a Berean, in a hospital. So, and if everybody knows what a Berean is, it's basically a Bible verse that be noble like the Bereans, for they listen to what Paul said and they search the scriptures to see if what he said was true. And I was that guy, man, on medical, and I'm not trained in that area. But I tell you, one of the things that I found back then, so this is in 2017.
Right.
I found a paper right off the bat when I was searching that in 2003 they had learned that hydroxychloroquine had stopped people from having the overreaction, which is a cytokine storm, is what it's called. And so this was like, oh, okay, I understand. Now they told me what the name of this was. It's called the cytokine storm. 11 to 14% of the people get some kind of, it can even get the flu and get these kind of overreactions. And then here I saw this, and I had people around me, people that lived in my community that were going down. And they told them, well, you stay home until it gets too bad, and then you come to the hospital. Well, it just so happens I got a doctor here that treats using the same things that I just mentioned, and I referred people to him. I said, hey, do you want me to make a phone call for you, see if he can get you in? There's people here in Wyoming now that know, hey, wait a minute. This was all a play. This was all, and I don't know what the end game was other than that they were controlling everything. Obviously, there's a goal here to vaccinate everybody. Is that Fauci's goal? I don't know. But there was a playbook. No doubt.
Yeah, there's, and speaking of the World Economic Forum, there is Jackson Hole, right? Jackson Hole hosts a global economic, and speaking of Colorado, I think Aspen's another location that banking elites do congregate. The vaccine issue is a totally different issue, but it does thread right into some things like ID 2020, which is this kind of passport type identification, digital identification. Things are definitely changing, and the digitization of the economy and how it operates, in my view, Anthony, is a major threat. Dr. Simone Gold is somebody that I've had a chance to grace in her presence a couple times, and I too, Anthony, see vast corruption, because I started the program regarding the Zika virus and the pesticide sprayed back in 2016, the fall of 16. That's what led me to start the program. So the health freedoms are a major issue, and certainly vaccine freedoms again are another major issue. Some closing thoughts. To leave our listeners. And again, I thank you and I commend you for doing excellent work and standing up for your beliefs. And it sounds like Sounds like you've got a lot of folks there in Wyoming supporting you. Folks will listen to this certainly all over the world. Most of the listeners that I do have are within the U.S. and Canada. But Anthony, some closing comments for listeners, if you would.
Well, look, remember, this is a seat in Congress, and if you like what I say, well, get behind me. Join my team. Go to anthonyforwyoming.com. I think that they've done this to us all along, and I say us, anybody who cared about liberty, anybody who cared about economic freedom. They've went and run elections against us using the global pattern. I say global pattern, I'm talking about, hey, let's make sure we get this guy out. He's running over there in Iowa or wherever. We need to do the same. We need to be supporting candidates, doesn't matter where they live. Support them if you believe in if you're on the same page. You care about liberty, you care about economic freedom, you care about leaving a better place for your grandchildren. So I believe I'm that guy, and I hope your listeners do too.
Fantastic, and very well said. And you've got my support, Anthony. Ladies and gentlemen, Anthony Bouchard, Wyoming State Senator, running for the federal congressional seat. Anthony, thank you for joining Discuss the Truth, and I look forward to inviting you back on the program.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
That is Anthony Bouchard, folks, you might be listening to this and saying, "Hey, this is a state senator that is openly calling out a globalist regime." I'm going to tell you this, and I'm simply going to tell you this. I have been diligently now for 5 years. I have diligently been researching this claim to a globalist network, and I've done so indirectly. I didn't mean to start looking at this. This is the trail that I went down as I had been exposed and invited. There were 2 invitations. David, my friend, he's no longer with us. He's committed suicide, but David invited me to a town hall meeting, Miami Beach. He said, listen to the debate regarding the Zika virus, a relatively benign coronavirus, and the pesticide being used. And it was at that debate that I saw a complete puppeteering happening. And I was interviewed by CBS reporter Michelle Gillen after that meeting, and that's exactly what I told her. That aired 5 o'clock news in Miami, CBS. The local politicians were being puppeted by the state. That includes Rick Scott. I have not spoken to him, but I'm just saying that his financial investment seemed to be puppeting, if you will. Again, seemed to be puppeteering from my understanding and research. The local politics there in Miami-Dade, and being handed down more importantly by the CDC in Atlanta. Ricky Rosselló rejected the shipment of this pesticide to combat the quote-unquote Zika virus. It's been around since the 1940s, known out of a monkey, extraction out of a monkey, known to man since the 1940s. Been around certainly much longer than that, is my guess. Rosselló rejected the shipment of it. And I actually got his office interested in speaking to me. This is 2017. We never able to line that up. But he rejected the shipment of this pesticide from the World Health Organization. Folks, there is corruption in the United Nations. The United Nations is a grand concept. Don't get me wrong. The United Nations is a grand concept. The World Health Organization, great, fine. The United Nations is a grand concept if it's based, in my view, off of U.S. constitutional values, which it is not. The United States Constitution is the most free and successful governing document ever written by man that we know of. Well, it wasn't written by a woman. Okay, fine. Man. Human beings. Period. Going into Vietnam, going to Iraq, Afghanistan, whatever the illusion is to create and implement democracy has been a fraud on the American people, most importantly. So here we have a sitting senator in the state of Wyoming openly declaring and claiming that the mainstream media essentially is a fraud and that the globalist regime is actively taking down the United States of America to implement communism. That is essentially the message that I received. You can receive your own if different from that. You can listen to this from a sitting senator from the state of Wyoming. State senator. And folks, there are more and more Americans waking up to this. I was led very quickly down the road of Zika and Dibrom and the connection of the Rockefellers and both of them. The Rockefellers having funded the science in Uganda behind the Zika virus, patented. There's a patent on it. How do you patent a natural virus? You patent the extraction process. And they also funded the Chevron Chemical Corporation that produced and engineered the Dibrom, the Naled, both interchangeable trade names of this pesticide. They both cause, for instance, microcephaly in the developing fetus. Yes, I'll repeat that. The Zika virus and the pesticide, the man-made engineered chemical that supposedly kills the Zika virus, both do the same thing. And so from there was led to a researcher out of Hoover in Palo Alto, Stanford. Okay, fine, I believe Stanford does have its own zip code. It probably is its own city, actually. I think it is its own city. I'll make that statement. It's right next to Palo Alto, California. Anthony Sutton. And Sutton began exposing the corruption in the banking system that governs the United States government. A bank controls the government. A private bank, folks. A private bank controls your public government. You should be up in arms right now demanding at every state capital transparency in the economic system that controls your states and your federal government in D.C. Transparency, that means open books. That means show me the shareholders. That means give me a darn good excuse why there is no gold standard. I'll tell you why there's no gold standard. Because if you look up a fellow named Dr. Peter Beter, B-E-T-E-R, he exposes the fact, he's saying fact, I have not declared a fact, but he's saying fact, that the Rockefeller, yes, monopoly, sold public gold that was stored in Fort Knox to European bankers. And I am no one to argue with him, folks, and nor should you, and you should be demanding that question right now, that answer to the question right now. Nixon overthrew the Bretton Woods Agreement. Nixon abolished the gold standard. Why is there no gold standard? Why? Likely, folks, because there's no gold. The United States doesn't have any gold. It's been sold. And if there's no gold backing your dollar bills, folks, then it is a fiat, fake currency. It's like monopoly money. All right? It's fictitious. And that's why, regardless Democrat, regardless Republican, whoever presides in the Oval Office or over the Oval Office does not care and continues to seek your government into further and further and further debt, setting the stage likely for a European banking globalist movement to completely abolish your country. And that is happening right now at an unprecedented rate. And people like Macy Gay or Macy Gray, whatever her name is, think she's a singer of some sort, an artist, that is openly calling for the destruction and replacement of the American flag. Once America falls, and once the U.S. Constitution falls, freedom and liberty as we know it globally falls. Tyranny takes over the globe because it will then control, again, your source of living, which is money. Follow the money. Money makes the world go round. You've allowed it to happen. I've allowed it to happen. We all have allowed it to happen. And if your money is fake, then everything that your money supports is also an illusion, more or less. Painting with a broad stroke there, but folks, you need to demand answers. You need to start asking these questions and demanding answers. There's no two ways about it. And thank goodness we have people like Anthony Bouchard in the state of Wyoming willing to stand up for what he believes in, because he believes in freedom and liberty for you and your family and for your kids and grandkids and the following generations that will follow us. But folks, if they don't get taught the right way, then they will not live in a free society, as we currently are. But it gets worse. It gets worse every year. It gets worse every year. So everything that Anthony addressed and confirmed, I stand by. Not because I'm a Republican, not because I'm a Democrat. And in fact, I didn't even vote as a Republican because I think both of the swamp parties are totally corrupt. They're both manipulated, controlled by the Federal Reserve System and those who control the Federal Reserve System, which is not, they're not American. They're European bankers. Follow the money. It goes right back to Basel, Switzerland. That is where the Bank of International Settlements regulates and controls all central banks globally. Prove me wrong, show me wrong. I've done enough research that I stand by that. If you can prove me wrong, then you prove me wrong. But then I'm just going to ask you to demand a transparency in the Federal Reserve System. Show me who the shareholders are. You can't, because it's not it's not public information. Right. Well, if your money system is controlled, that means every aspect of your life is controlled. And if it's controlled by a private bank, then that means you are at the will and the whim of the private banksters. This is nothing new to society. In fact, it's the same debate that Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton were having in and around 1776, the years after that. Okay, it's the same thing Abraham Lincoln was fighting for. It's the same thing Garfield was fighting for, McKinley was fighting for, and the same thing John F. Kennedy was fighting for. There's plenty of us now that are fighting for that, and Anthony Bouchard is one of them. Ron Paul is another one of them. And more politicians will come to light. I can guarantee you that. Because as those very freedoms and liberties begin to fade away, it's people like me and likely like you who are listening that will draw the line and stand up. So I urge you to do that now. I urge you to make a stand, become vocal, demand answers, and certainly do things in a peaceful manner. Do things in a peaceful manner, a la Martin Luther King. What a disgrace some of these movements are today. BLM. Believe me, I have plenty of black friends, Asian friends. I hardly ever date white women. That's just been my record. Until next time, folks, this has been Ian Trottier for another discussion of truth. I appreciate you listening. Please send to a friend, family member. I do this for you. I'm self-financed, and I do it because I believe in the country and the Constitution. And I will continue to fight for you and for those freedoms that help you and your kids. So until next time, folks, thanks for listening and be awesome.